caught my wife sleeping with my brother right after his wife passed away from cancer. So I told everyone about their affair and cut them out of my life for good. I, 33, male, knew my wife, 31, female, all of my life. But she and I hadn't started dating until about 10 years ago. We went to high school together, though we weren't really in the same circles. I was more athletic and involved in sports, and she was a bit of a bookworm who spent her full time in the library. I hate to say it, but I hardly even noticed her in high school. But at a reunion, we ran into each other and we really hit it off. I didn't even care about any of the other classmates in the room. I just wanted to talk to her. We ended up dating, and a year later, we got married. It all happened fast, but we felt like it was right. For the past 10 years of our marriage, we have never questioned that. A little over a year ago, my sister in law was tragically diagnosed with lung cancer. The entire family was shattered by the news, especially my brother. Unfortunately, my sister in law wasn't able to fight off the cancer, and she passed away about 3 months after the diagnosis. It was a horrible tragedy for the entire family, and there was a hole left in our hearts. My wife had always been a very gentle, caring person, so she took it upon herself to make sure my brother was taken care of. While he was in mourning, she would make food and bring it over to his house. She would make sure he was eating. She washed his clothes and made sure he had someone to talk to. From the way it sounded, she was a rock for him in the hardest time of his life. Never, in my wildest dreams, would I have thought that the two of them were sleeping together. But I was so wrong. The first instance where I noticed something was off was when I showed up at my brother's house one day. After my wife had told me she was going over there, I had a key, and I never knocked on his door when I went to visit. So I just walked in and hollered for them both. It took a minute for them to come and meet me, but they both came from the part of the house where the bedrooms were. Genuinely, I did not think anything could have been going on. I asked them what was going on, and they told me that they were just tidying up the room. The three of us spent the rest of the night together at his house. I noticed that they were sitting somewhat close on the couch, but I didn't think much of it. I trusted them one night. While my wife and I were both at home, she got a text message from my brother. She told me that she would be going over there the following day and helping him go through some of his wife's belongings. I didn't have a problem with it, but I was starting to feel like she was too much of a crutch for him. I suggested that maybe instead of going over there, we should offer to pay for therapy for him. I figured it might be nice for him to have a professional to talk to. She just brushed it off and said that she would talk to him about it and see what he said the following day. Now I knew that packing up some of his wife's belongings and figuring out what to do with them would be a big task. That is a big step in moving forward for anyone. I was a little hurt that he hadn't asked me to help him. But again, my wife had been a major help to him since his wife passed while I was driving home from work. I figured it might be nice to stop by and offer to help. I grabbed some takeout food and made my way over to my brother's house. When I unlocked the door to go in, I was about to holler and get their attention, but I heard some strange noises. They were unmistakably sex noises. I couldn't believe I was hearing something like that when my brother had just lost his wife. On top of that, he was there with my wife. I simply walked out of the house. I was shocked at the time, and I didn't know how to process what I had just heard. I tried to rationalize it, thinking that maybe he had someone else there, and it wasn't my wife. But when I got home and saw that she wasn't there, I knew that wasn't the case. I played it cool, thinking about how I wanted to move forward. I was 100% going to leave my wife, and I was going to cut my brother off. Both of them completely shattered my trust. My wife returned home about an hour later and immediately went to take a shower. While she was in there, I walked into the bathroom and started brushing my teeth. It wasn't unusual for us to use the bathroom at the same time. That's one of the perks of married life. I guess her phone was on the counter, so I grabbed it while she was showering. I looked through her messages with my brother and found dozens of text messages where they had both been recounting the times they shared together. My brother was frequently asking her to come over because he wanted to feel her again. I scrolled back to around the time when my wife first started going to visit him. I found messages where they confessed their feelings for each other. Apparently, my brother had put the first feelers out for the relationship. He told my wife that he had always each other at work because it was against office policy to date anyone that you worked with. Technically, Sarah and I never really worked together because we dealt with such different issues. But when we had company-wide meetings, obviously, we'd see each other there. And sometimes the projects I was working on would overlap with what she was dealing with upstairs. Eventually, people just let it slide, and it just became another thing. And like I said, we never screamed it off the rooftops, and nobody seemed to mind. Not only that, but when you work in an office, people get kind of crazy. People flirt with everybody. And my wife is attractive. I will say that. And I constantly heard it from other people. And I even heard it from a lot of the female staff. People in an office space get kind of horny. It's sort of pathetic in a way. So her assistant, I'll call him Trevor. He's 29, has a political science degree. I'll admit it, he's a good-look guy. And there was only about 12 men in the whole building, compared to like 40 or so women. So we were outnumbered. And when Trevor started, these single ladies literally pounced at him from the start. It seemed like Sarah could have cared less. She seemed all business. She didn't even bring him up. To me, really, I knew that she was hiring an assistant, but I didn't know that she hired a male. Not that there's anything wrong with that, but when I saw him and saw how good-looking he was, I sort of understood why she didn't say anything. And at one point, she even said that he reminded her of me, but a young version of me. And then another time, she said that Trevor was the version of me. If I didn't get in my own head and I took a different career path, I was sort of offended by that. How am I supposed to take that? When I found out she hired him and didn't tell me for a few weeks, I asked her why. And she said, "Why is it such a big deal?" And then she laughed in my face. And she said that I felt threatened by a little boy. I'm like, threatened? And she's like, "Yeah, you're jealous." And yeah, I guess I was in some way. And yeah, maybe I was threatened. But I tried to argue to her that her admitting the fact that he was a guy and was good looking sort of made a point. And she said I was being ridiculous because I wouldn't have had the same reaction if it was a good-look woman. And I was like, yeah, true. But would she still have slept with him and made comments that he reminded her of a young me if it was a woman? No, not only that, but I heard our secretary asking her questions about Trevor, and they'd both be giggling, another red flag. Yeah, okay, maybe I was jealous, but it wouldn't be. Not only that, but I wasn't feeling well, physically, so it was really eating away at me. I wasn't feeling my best. I wasn't my best. And I knew it, and I feel like Sarah really took advantage of that. So yeah, I go on short-term disability, and this means I'm at home for a couple of weeks. I become the main caregiver for my kids, and Sarah starts to work really long hours and goes away on trips, so When she was on these trips, she took this assistant with her, and then she's posting pictures on Instagram of herself and clothes that aren't really professional or like on the beach. And I can tell that she has no bikini top on the photo, is just of her. But I know that he's with her. I comment on the photo, and I'm like scandalous, but she doesn't react to it or anything. Then I creep Trevor's page. He's got a public page, and see that he's in fact posting photos of the same beach, but it's of the water. But then I know that they're together, and I know that my wife is laying on the beach next to him without a bikini top on. I text her, and I'm like, should you be posting photos like that on Instagram? And she's like, what are you talking about? And I'm like, you're not wearing a shirt, and you're showing a lot of skin. Do you think that's smart to be doing when you have the position that you do? People look up to you. And then we got in a huge fight, and she didn't talk to me for the rest of her work trip. And I say that lightly, work trip. She was sleeping with him at this point. And another note, yeah, these work trips took her all over the country, and she'd get time for business and pleasure. That disgusts me now. But I'm trying to just get through this with self-deprecating humor, because that's the only way I'm surviving right now. But yeah, she had free time. One on these trips, this particular trip was on Kelowna, BC. So it was nice weather, and she knew she'd have some time for the beach. Apparently, while she was here, I was taking care of the kids. I didn't mind this at all. But what I did mind was the fact that she was having relations with someone other than me, her husband. And it's embarrassing because everyone at the office knew this. They'd stay at work late together. They'd constantly be in meetings with a closed door. Had feelings for her in high school. But he was too nervous to ask her out. She told him that she had felt the same way. She went so far to tell him that sometimes when she was sleeping with me, she would be imagining that it was him. I took screenshots of the messages and I sent them to myself. Before deleting them from her phone, I put it back down on the counter so she would never know that I even had them. I hated them both, and I wanted them to suffer for what they did. As angry as I was that they betrayed me, I couldn't believe that they would disrespect my brother's late wife the way that they had. They were both unbelievably selfish, and they needed to be called out for it. I gathered several of my family members, mostly the core family, who had the biggest impact on my and my brother's lives. My brother and my wife were there, sitting right next to each other. We had a peaceful dinner together, and toward the end, just outright told everybody what I discovered. My brother and wife tried to make it seem like I was crazy and nothing was going on. Then, I pulled out my phone and read off quotes from the screenshots. They looked horrified. As I read the messages, my mom asked my brother if what I said was true, and I could hear the sadness in her voice. Everybody yelled at both of them for how disrespectful it was to my sister-in-law. It hadn't even been 6 months since she had passed away, and he had started an affair with his sister-in-law. Everybody asked questions, and we found out that the affair started 2 months after his wife died. It was unbelievable to hear everybody was yelling at them and telling them that they were selfish and cold, and I didn't want to see them. My parents didn't think that I handled it the right way, but they were glad that I told everyone about it. They had all been feeling very sorry for him for his grief, but he was clearly not mourning in the same way as them. In the end, I divorced my wife, and I'm happy now without her. She didn't ask for anything in the divorce, and if she did, I had enough evidence of her affair that she wouldn't have gotten it. Almost all of my family is extremely angry with my brother, and he hasn't been invited to any gatherings or events since they found out. I don't know if people are going to come around and forgive him, or if he's going to stay in the doghouse. Thus, all I know is that I never want to see either of them again now. On to the next story. Story 2, caught my cheating wife. Story 2, having an affair with her assistant at our office. So I secretly gathered evidence and filed for divorce. Now she's begging to win me back. As our divorce gets ugly, my wife, I'll call her Sarah, and I work for a pretty big KN for profit in Western Canada. This particular organization is in the public eye and has a lot to do with politicians. And for the last 8 or so years, our organization has been trying to get a certain agreement signed and recognized by the federal government. Anyways, without getting too into details of that, my wife's position meant that she was constantly on the news and working with big wigs and traveling the country and kissing people's asses. I guess, literally and figuratively. Now I found out she was cheating on me with her assistant that she hired about 6 months ago. She was in the department upstairs, and me in the registration department. We actually met at the organization. 8 years ago, we both started. Within a few months, we both worked our asses off to get into the positions that we're in now. It wasn't easy. And OBS, like I said, she kisses ass, and she's super charismatic and has a way with words. When she speaks, people listen. When she walks into a room, she demands people's attention. I'm a little more introverted, and for years, that really worked for us. Well, I ended up having some health troubles and had to go on short-term disability. So I wasn't at work for a little bit. And this is sort of when this all started, or at least when I figured something was up. Some things to note. I'm almost positive that assistant didn't know we were married. I'm sure of this because he would look at me strange when I brought her lunch or brought her coffee in the mornings. He looked at me as if like, who the heck are you? He knew who I was and that I worked in the building, but I'm not sure that Sarah ever told him who I was to her. I mean, it's not like we went around the building saying, hey, we're married, but like the people who work there know. And gossip travels fast around this organization because people like drama and like starting drama, which is why I ended up finding out that things were going on. A little background info. Sarah is 45 and I'm 43. It turns out that we actually went to the same high school, but it was a bigger school. So our paths never crossed. We have 2 kids. We have a son who's 7 and a daughter who's 5. They literally the loves of my life. And I truly believe my life didn't start until they arrived. We hit it off right away. And at the time, it was a big deal that we started seeing and closed window blinds, but she tried to argue that she was having meetings about confidential things. Oh yeah, confidential. All right, a woman at work who didn't actually like her very much. Angela ended up telling me recently that she heard moans and slurps and all kinds of atrocious sounds coming from that room. Angela and Sarah shared an office wall. And the thing about this office building is that it was gifted to us, and it didn't have as many offices in the building originally. When the organization started, we literally didn't have any money, so we had to just make do and throw up walls. So some of the office walls in this place are paper thin and weren't meant to be permanent. And if Angela would have told me about these noises she heard back then, I would have just thought that she's saying this to complain about Sarah because she doesn't like her. But after it all came out and I caught them red-handed, I don't doubt her for a second. I'm getting ahead of myself. So she's spending a lot of late nights there. And there's whispers going on about how close they're getting and whatnot. I'm in total denial. I can't believe she'd ever do anything like that to me. She posts more pictures on her Instagram, and it looks like someone is taking these photos of her. These photos look like they're in really intimate restaurants, dark candlelit places. When she comes home after going out like this, she claims they're business meetings. And I sort of say they look like really intimate business meetings, and with my particular sickness. At the time, I was having a hard time, and she never, not once asked how I was doing. She was always too busy working. And I can't even remember the last time she was home to say goodnight to our kids. Even our kids were asking, "Where's mommy? When's mommy going to be home?" I miss mommy. It broke my damn heart. And what do I tell them? Oh, mommy's working. Mommy's trying to help her citizens. Nope. Mommy's just cheating on daddy and throwing her family away. Anyways, one particular evening, I get a text from a number I didn't recognize, and it was like, "Get to work right now. You're going to want to see this. Don't call your wife, don't let her know you're on her way, but head to her office." And I'm like, weird. I tried calling the number, but it just disconnected. So I call my mom to come over to be at the house because my kids were sleeping. And I didn't want to wake them up to go. So she comes over and asks if everything is okay. And I'm like, oh, yeah, I just have to go help Sarah with something. So I go and I park down the road so she can't see my car. In the parking lot, I sneak into the side door with my key card. The lights are off in the building. But when I go upstairs, I can see that the lights in her side of the building are still on. It's long after everyone has gone home for the day too long. After her, in fact, and then I walk slowly up to her office. The door is open, and I see Trevor just giving it to her on her desk. She's bent over, and she looks up and sees me. I'm just standing there. She has to hit Trevor to stop, and then she quickly pulls her skirt back down, making out in her office again on her desk. They were wearing different clothes, so it wasn't the same night that I caught them. Then another message came in, and it was another video. This time, it was of Trevor and Sarah making out in her car. In the parking lot, I saved them all. I replied was, "Thank you," and they responded with a thumbs up emoji. I sat there for a while, wondering what I was going to do. I had to make it good. Then I knew there was an election coming up. And what I mean by that is that the person Sarah worked for had to be elected back into office. And the only way Sarah was going anywhere was if the person she worked for didn't get voted back in. So I contacted the person who was the opposition to Sarah's boss. I also happened to know that this person had a really good chance at getting in, but just needed a little bit more endorsements. I figured that this whole thing with Sarah could really look back for Sarah's boss in their campaign. Well, when I contacted the opposition, I told them everything and sent them the videos that had been sent to me. I started endorsing this person, and as soon as this happened and the videos ended up getting spread all over the office, it totally divided the office. The organization had some really tense energy around it, and the whole process took about 5 months. During those 5 months, I had to go into the office and pretend like nothing was happening in that. Sarah and I weren't going through a separation, but it was awkward. I'm not going to lie, and Trevor ended up getting let go. I don't even know exactly when, but Sarah let him go. And then she hired some 18-year-old intern. The intern was a girl. But not only that, as soon as these women at the office found out that I was single, they were coming at me, left, right, and center. I hadn't had this kind of attention in years, and honestly, it felt good. Sure, I flirted back. I'm not ashamed to admit that. But I'll never. Where I eat ever again, been there, done that. And my wife sucker punched me with a good-looking boy. Sarah tried to come home a few times and was apologizing. And she said she missed the kids, but I said she was never around before. She never mentioned anything about missing me or the kids. So the only thing that's changed is that she's going to lose it all in a matter of months. Legally, I had to give her some visitation rights. So she did have the right to come and see them at scheduled times, but I wouldn't be there. My mom was in the house, though. While this was happening, because I didn't actually trust Sarah, she was very much the person who would try to pull a fast one and lock me out of the house or attempt to brainwash the kids against me. I wasn't going to let that happen. Anyways, when the election came, Sarah's boss didn't get in Eureka. Sweet, sweet revenge within a week. The opposition came in, and they hired someone else to be their Sarah. Not only that, but I was given a $155,000 promotion. We still have a bit to go on this road to divorce, but I just wanted to share my story. Think twice about dating anybody at work. You never know who you'll catch bending them over the desk you chose together. As for the messenger, I did end up asking Angela if it was her, but she was adamant that it wasn't. She thinks that maybe it was one of these women here that wanted to shack up with me for themselves. I like to think that it's Angela, and she'll just never admit that it was her. I think she just really saw her chance to get rid of Sarah and took it